Hello, and welcome to my 2-month extended review of the Ryedale Apprentice Penny Sorter. Now, I've already given an in-depth review of the penny sorter after I bought it, so if you're looking for particulars on the unit, please see my previous video. Now, after 1.5 months of heavy use, I've got to say, this thing really is rock solid. Let's take a quick look at one of the most common jams I've encountered. Now, cleaning the slide with Windex does seem to help this. There is little maintenance and upkeep to this machine, but let's break down the machine and look into one that is vital. They recommend lubricating the spring and paw after roughly $300 worth of coin has been fed through the machine. Okay, so first we're going to disassemble this. There are 2 slide bolts over here. Slide up. And there's a button over here that needs to be depressed, which I already depressed. Next, there's a jigsaw piece right here that comes off. And right there, right here, you can see the spring and paw. What we want to lube is the second slider right here. And you can see I have a piece of coin roll paper in here as well that I want to get out. So what I'm going to do is drop a couple of drops on the slider. And take our fine tip screwdriver and slide back and forth. And you should do this after roughly $300 in coin has passed through the machine. This keeps everything flowing nice and smooth for you. Let's go check out my totals to see what I've accumulated after 1.5 months of sorting pennies. Okay, so here are my earnings so far. Stashed away in these 25-pound coffee containers. Every coffee container here can hold around 26 pounds of pennies, more or less, but I've rounded it down to 25 for purposes of this video. Now, I decided to stop as soon as I broke even on the machine to see if this was worth my time or not. Now, I stand behind the machine 100%. It works very well. As I mentioned, all of these numbers are rounded up or down to the nearest dollar amount. Now, we have to keep in mind the value that we had to pay for the pennies, face value, to get a profit of $56 per 25-pound container. So every 25-pound container has $39 in pennies for a melt value of $95, leaving us a profit of $56 per container. Understood? Okay. So in order to break even, we needed to reach a profit of $500, as that's what I had to pay for the machine. Okay, so here it is. 225 pounds of copper in the form of pre-1982 pennies. They have a face value of $348, a melt value of $854, leaving me a profit of $506. Now, what did I have to go through to obtain all of this? Well, in my last bulk penny purchase, I purchased around $400 in pennies and found roughly $100 in face value copper pennies. That's around 25% copper. Not the best yield, but I've also heard stories of worse. With these numbers on the average, I had to go through around $1,600 in pennies to clear this profit that you see here. So I went through 64 boxes of pennies. That's a lot of work. Now, is it worth my time? I don't rightfully know yet. Factor in the time that it takes to pick up the boxes, unwrap the pennies, process them through the machine, and wash the zincs back to the bank, repeating the process over and over and over again. I'm not rightfully sure if it's worth my time or not. This is a lot of work. Now, I did this with a bank willing to sell me large bulks of pennies. When I say large, think a trunk load. And $400 in pennies filled up half of my trunk. And I did it in under 2 months. Now, I had a hookup with my bank, and it still took a lot of my time. So here are my final thoughts for you. The machine itself, as I've mentioned before, is rock solid. After abusing this thing for 2 months of heavy use, I have absolutely no fear of this machine at all. It works great. But in order to turn a decent profit, you need to give this hobby a good 10 to 12 hours a month. At least that in my eyes. Now, after you pay off the machine's steep price, you will probably feel a little better about your first set of profits. So if you have the time, I say go for it. It's fun and you're making a real profit. But please don't think there's no work involved. There is plenty. If you can't give this hobby at least 10 hours a month, I do not recommend buying this machine or even breaking into this hobby. But if you can, there is no better of a machine to do so. It works very well. Now keep in mind that I went through all of my copper as well, and I manually pulled all of my wheat pennies out of my copper stash here, and I got around 6 pounds of wheat pennies. There is a secondary value for these things because they're older. Inside here, I did find some rather valuable ones. I think a couple of mine were an Indian head from 1885, I believe, and a slew of older wheat pennies from the early 1900s that have value to collectors as well. Now, as I mentioned, that took a while to do, and I did not tally any of this into account for the review. So there you have it, my honest 2-month review of the Ryedale Penny Sorter. Best of luck.